Welcome into our post-game coverage of South Carolina, Texas A&M tonight from here at Kyle Field at College Station, Texas A&M University. Our coverage, our sports talk at the stadium, brought to you by the Touchstone Energy Cooperatives Bowl North-South game coming up in December. Got the rosters out for that game this week, and it's a great looking group of players who will be participating in December in Myrtle Beach. So here tonight, 44-14 final score. Texas A&M over South Carolina. Not going to try and put lipstick on this pig. It was awful for the Gamecocks from the get-go. Early punt return, 95 yards for Texas A&M off the Gamecocks' first possession, and it was pretty much all downhill from there for South Carolina. They could do nothing with Texas A&M. Not going to go into a great deal of detail about the back and forth in this ball game because you know what? There was no back and forth. There was just all Texas A&M putting the pedal to the metal and blowing the Gamecocks out by the end of the first quarter. 477 yards on the night for Texas A&M to 185 for the Gamecocks, including an incredible minus 23 yards in the second quarter. Gamecocks had 11 yards at the half, and their longest play of the game was 20 yards for South Carolina. Think about that. Gamecocks averaged 3.2 yards per play. Texas A&M, 15.6 yards per completion as they were hitting big balls down the field. A&M rushed for 290 yards. A-Chain had 154, and Spiller had 102 yards. Colzada had 187 yards passing. He was just efficient. He had more yards passing than South Carolina had in total offense. A&M on first downs, A&M averaged 5.6 yards per play, so they were setting themselves up at the very beginning of every drive. Here's an interesting stat. On third downs, USC's average yardage to get a first down on their third downs, 9.2 yards, okay? You're that far behind the chains, you're not going to get too many first downs, and the Gamecocks did not until they knocked in a couple of touchdowns late. Smith had that 95-yard touchdown return off the Gamecocks' first possession for a 7-0 lead. The Gamecocks did make a defensive play after a tip ball. Jalen Foster intercepted his fifth of the season. That's best in the country. That was one of the positives for South Carolina. But they could do nothing with it. And A&M then went on three straight touchdown drives, led 31-0 at the half, 44-0 going into the fourth quarter. In the first half, USC's deepest penetration was the A&M 41-yard line. Didn't even sniff the end zone. Finally scored Marshawn Lloyd, his first career touchdown for the Gamecocks, a 9-yard run in the fourth quarter, and then Kenyon had a 12-yard touchdown catch from Jason Brown. So that's it as far as the nuts and bolts of the game for South Carolina. And, you know, here the Gamecocks go into their break, and Shane Beamer after the game trying to put whatever spin he could put on this game, and all he could say is, look, they are 4-4. That's where they are. That's not a disastrous situation with 4 games to go. That means you're 2 wins away from making a bowl game, which is all this team. 2 things this team can hope for to make it a somewhat rememberable season. Not a memorable season, but a one that you can remember with some fondness, and that is A, get the 2 wins to get to a bowl game, and B, beat Clemson to end that losing streak. And after what we saw today up in Pittsburgh, that looks more and more possible for South Carolina. And not saying that they are where they can to beat Clemson, because that Clemson defense is still pretty good, and that Gamecock offense is really, really bad. So I don't know. But that's something to be discussed in about 6 weeks or so. Right now, the Gamecocks have to go back to work and try and make something of their next game in a couple of weeks against the Florida Gators. They've got 4 games left, 3 at home, Florida, Auburn, Clemson, and 1 on the road against Missouri. One would think they might be able to squeeze out a couple of wins from those 4 games. But I don't know. One thing you take away from this game tonight, when you look at South Carolina, and this is not breaking news, you knew this going in because you have a new coaching staff. And why do you have a new coaching staff? Because things weren't going well with the previous staff. And the difference between a South Carolina and the elite of the SEC, and they've played, even though A&M has 2 losses, I consider them elite. And the difference between Georgia and Texas A&M and South Carolina right now, that gap is huge. Not so bad between them and, say, a Kentucky or even a Tennessee. If they maybe done things a little differently at Tennessee, that could have been a little bit of a closer ball game. But there are teams in their league that they can play with. Obviously, they can beat Vanderbilt. I think the Florida game gives them a chance at home to see if they can beat a named team. We all know Florida is not great. They're going to be coming off the Georgia game, so they should be somewhat emotionally drained after they get dragged all around by Georgia, I would expect, next week. So you get them at home. And even though it's not a great Florida team, if you can beat them, that is a good name to hang on the wall. That's what they need. That's what this team needs to try to make something out of this season. Looking at Auburn in a couple of weeks at home after that, I don't know. Auburn looks awfully good at times, and they have played well on the road at times this year, better than in recent years. Going to Missouri, I think, is a very winnable game for them because Missouri can't stop anybody. The Gamecock offense might be able to do something. And then, of course, Clemson will be Clemson, and we'll talk more about that. But tonight was just a totally embarrassing performance in every aspect of the game for the Gamecocks. They couldn't block A&M. They could not stop A&M. Every time A&M wanted to run the football when the game was, still somewhat of a, well, it never was in doubt, but it wasn't a blowout yet. But, I mean, A&M could do whatever they wanted to do. They could reset the line of scrimmage with their offensive line. Their running backs could take their time and choose the holes and find plenty of running room. The quarterback was hardly ever under duress. Their receivers had plenty of time to run their routes and get open. It was a complete breakdown in every facet of the game. And I guess the one thing you would want to see as a Gamecock fan watching is just some competitiveness. No competitiveness really against Georgia after Nolan went out and after the game kind of got away from them going into halftime. But here at Texas A&M, absolutely no competitiveness whatsoever from the opening bell. That had to be the most disappointing thing, I would say, for Gamecock fans. So USC is now 0-8 lifetime against Texas A&M. Maybe the good news, I don't know if they'll ever beat Texas A&M. Maybe when the SEC finally expands and Texas and Oklahoma come into the league, and maybe, the way things will be redesigned, A&M will come off the Gamecock schedule, but they'll probably pick up Alabama and Auburn in the exchange there. I don't know if that's good news or not. But nothing but bad news from here tonight, 44-14. That final score. We've got comments from Shane Beamer and some players up on our website, sportstalksc.com. Beamer plans to have a conference call tomorrow night to review everything at about 7:15. We'll have that covered for you. And then on Sports Talk Monday night, I'll be joined by Chris Bergen and Matt Smith, and we'll take your phone calls and hear what you have to say about everything. There's plenty of complaining. Not that we thrive on complaints, but there's plenty of complaining to go around between the Gamecocks and the Tigers after this weekend, one of the ugliest weekends for football on the FBS level in our state in a long, long time. And you can throw Coastal Carolina into the mix as well because, of course, they lost earlier in the week. That'll do it from here at Kyle Field. Thanks for checking us out here at Sports Talk SC and on sportstalksc.com. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you Monday on Sports Talk.